The Return. Chapter 16. Contact. When Tigrum first arrived, Sally was the only one to approach him outside official business. She smiled and asked him what his name meant.
No fucking idea. Why would you want to know?
Just trying to be friendly, smiling first winningly, then uncertainly.
Is that what you're for, to be friendly?
His smile was less than reassuring. Sally was actually frightened then, and moved away without answering.
I can be friendly,
he called after her mockingly. Then turning to Artem, he said,
Do women ever get on your fucking nerves?
Artem grunted.
Well, that one does.
In official parlance, Tigrum was their new principal. Much against both Johnson's and Maggie's wishes, they had started working with a Saam replacement. 7 weeks he had been gone, 3 in captivity, 4 more at the Hannath enclosure. They tried to console themselves by reminding each other how tired Saam had been, how much he needed to rest. It was small comfort. Tigrum was also a Kerep ex-fighter, but there the similarities ended. He tolerated Artem but complained long and often about the smell. He would sometimes interrupt a new person's cry of surprise with a flat, "Not Saam, sorry." Once he even added, "But at least I won't spend half the day curling my hair, so there's that, right?" When asked why he wore his hair so brutally short, he said, "Because I'm not fucking stupid. How many times have you seen someone grab Pretty Boy by that simply lovely hair of his?" Sally had teared up and said, "Well, that won't be happening for a while, will it?" And Maggie had taken him aside and gently advised him against referring to Saam as Pretty Boy, or she would have his balls. He trained obsessively, was very careful with his diet, yet there was nothing beautiful about that squat, strong body. In fact, he had the beginnings of a belly which clearly mortified him. His face would have been unremarkable Kerep but for a scar from a cut through his brow that should have taken the eye below but somehow didn't. He answered no personal questions and often ignored anything said to him. Someone came up with the information that he had been an engineer on the Hannath ship. He wasn't kind. He wasn't funny. He didn't steal their lunches. They missed Saam terribly. When the video call from Saam came through on Matt's terminal, he hit record immediately, which was as well since the groggy Saam, blithely unaware, spoke almost entirely in Hannath. They would have to watch the recording later with Otaku and Artem translating to get all the finer details.
Hello, is that Matt?
Hello, Matt.
I know I'm supposed to know all the IP addresses, but... So this one is yours. It's good to see your face.
He was struggling with a pair of over-the-ear headphones as Matt yelled, "Get Otaku!" and the others started to gather round his machine. Saam, bare-chested, thin, with a short, ragged mop of now very curly hair, was saying,
"These earphones are not made for these ears,"
and laughing, actually laughing.
"I'm not sure where I am. I don't think I'm in any danger."
He trailed off, his concentration poor. It would flicker in and out like a faulty fluorescent light.
"Shigeru, Tanaka-san, tomodachi, genki desu ka?"
He greeted the little man happily in his own language. Otaku would tear up later when he translated for the team, telling them that tomodachi was friend.
"Smith and Ham are dead.
Suddenly he was crying, simply and quietly, 2 lines of tears that didn't want to bother anyone.
"I'm so sorry. We were attacked as soon as we landed. I managed to hurt one of them, but no more than that."
His hands were trembling and he was fidgeting. His torso showed the kind of bruising you associate with broken ribs. He rubbed one eyebrow, confused, then put the other hand flat on his chest and shifted his ribs as if he was sore. Momentarily stroked a large scar on his chest that looked like a knife cut. They took my knife, cut my fucking hair with it. His laugh now was slightly manic. Otaku flashed back to the scene where a pair of them had pulled off his clothes, brutally stripped him, before starting on his hair. He shuddered. They took my phone and my communicator. He touched his cheek with the back of his fingers. I think they made quite a mess of my face. The hand moved till he was touching his lips with his fingertips, trying to gather his thoughts. Then, please tell Lewis I'm okay. Saam looked around, bewildered, then straight at the machine. In the room where I sleep there's an apple that smells just like the ones from Maggie's garden. Just one. I think maybe Maggie was here. The food is good, but it's still hard to chew. He put a tentative finger in his mouth and grimaced. I think some of my teeth have been replaced. He rested an elbow on the desk, then rested his face on that hand, giving them a close-up of his battered, happy face. Can you hear me? I can't hear you. Matt was aware he was fighting with the sound settings. He wanted Saam to hear them, but he was desperate not to cut him off altogether. Saam's mind wandered again, and he noticed something on the desk. He leaned away for a second, then came back with a small bowl and a spoon. Something soft, pudding-like. He forgot about them for a minute as he emptied the bowl, raised it to lick it, turned the spoon upside down to suck it with his tongue. That's good. Then he saw movement on his screen as Artem pushed his way in. Artem. A sweet, drugged smile. Are you okay? Artem gritted his teeth and said yes, he was fine. Saam threw up his hands in excitement. I can hear you. Then in English, I think I've just eaten someone's lunch. It's almost like being at home. He laughed happily at the idea. Someone dressed in grey had come to stand beside him, looking down at him. Tigrum and Artem looked at each other. Hannath? Shake of the head. No. Too slight. Maggie, talapesh aujourd'hui. Maggie held up a hand in greeting. She found herself choked, unable to speak. He was looking at her with such sweet filial affection it made her dumb. Maggie, the gardens here are beautiful. I fell asleep on the grass yesterday. It was full of tiny blue flowers. The slaves here have been kind. He glanced sideways at the dark presence next to him. Well, most of them. And he laughed again. Was that a slip of the tongue that he talked about slaves? They would argue about that later. When the woman next to him finally spoke, she said coldly, This communication is unauthorized. Only one sentence, though they all agreed, She doesn't like him one bit. Okay. Saam looked up at her, gave her one of his giddy, I'm finding everything funny today, smiles that could melt ice, but not apparently her. He turned, reached out to touch the screen, and smiled at them. And then the signal was cut. Sally would wail later when she found she had missed it, and was only partially mollified by being able to watch the recording with the rest. They agreed he had given no signs, none of the agreed signals. He wasn't calling for help. Artem was just not fucking happy. Did you see the earring? He touched his left ear. Is that what I think it is? What, his owner never gave the golden boy one of those? Tigrum was cynical. He found the Saam fan club a bit wearing, though he had to admit to himself after seeing the video feed, he was indeed a very pretty boy. And Maggie would later add golden boy to the list of things he would not say in her hearing. Nah, said Artem. Bastard never had that kind of status. He turned to the others to explain. It's beyond the status collar. Only the most senior Hannath in the group gets to use them. If a status collar is back the fuck off, that's
Touch me and you're dead. You're sure that's new? Of course I'm fucking sure. That has been put on him while he's been there, with Karis. In fact, it must have been Karis who did it, had it done.
Sally said, "But what does that mean?" None of them knew. Tigrum suspected he'd parlayed his handsome ass into protection by the top dog, but kept that to himself. He shook his head.
Fucking trained slaves. How did that pretty little bastard, how did he ever survive the vengeance?
Otaku said stoutly,
"By being the bravest little bastard on it."
Tigrum, who had a lot of time for Otaku, did his best not to laugh in the man's face.
Okay, so he's brave, but right now he's off his fucking head.
Sally was in tears again. Even Otaku was beginning to get tired of it. Talon the Kerep was short, tubby, middle-aged, had never been a beauty, and had an attitude that in the old days had got her into trouble many times. Right now she was directing that attitude at Nazar, a slightly built Nadiv Xonak crossbreed, who did a lot of the administrative work for the household. As Talon said behind her back, she was a bed slave that he, Lord Karis, had tired of, but kept on out of pity. She should be grateful, not behave as though she was better than the rest, which she wasn't. She was hardly bigger than a girl, and not exactly voluptuous. Quite ordinary, except for those stunning violet eyes, which were always hostile. Nazar was trying to make an issue out of her shagging the hurt boy she'd been keeping warm. What business was it of hers, and who told her?
You weren't authorized.
Talon screwed up her face in offence and ridicule. I'm not a slave, I fuck who I want. Nazar's slight frame shuddered a little at the vulgarity.
No one asked it of you. Did he force you? Don't be daft. Right now he couldn't force wind.
He has no right to... It was my own idea, all right? He's no right to agree. And what's it to you? Nazar, angry as ever, looked at her in silence. He's a sweet boy who's off his head right now, in a lot of pain. If I can give him some comfort, that's up to me and none of your business.
So he talked you into it?
Talked nothing. He didn't say very much except,
"Oh, that's good."
She mimicked his voice well. One of the kitchen staff, busy prepping vegetables for the next meal, looked over her shoulder and started laughing. It was guaranteed to annoy Nazar, which was in part why she did it. And he knows his way around a woman. Not the worst night I've ever had, not by a long chalk. And he thanked me afterwards and cuddled me all night and remembered my name. That's better than I'm used to. You won't be so impressed with him if he makes you pregnant. Who knows what ancestry produced that beautiful boy? Oh, please, best fuck I've had in a decade.
That's enough, Talon.
Talon sneered at her. Whatever. Samran was beginning to move around more, walking in the grounds each day, even coming to the outdoor breakfast table to eat with Tor. Tor seemed to have taken quite a shine to him, sycophant that he was, in Nazar's eyes. Saam had noticed his earring and was puzzled by it, played with it. He was finishing one piece of fruit and fetching himself another when he looked up and saw that she, too, was wearing one.
"How does this come off?" he asked, touching his own ear, still chewing.
It doesn't. Saam didn't like the sound of that, a bit too much like a status collar. Without thinking, he put out his hand to touch her earring. She gave his hand a quite vicious slap. "Ow!" he said, childlike, confused. "You do not touch me without my permission, you..." And she gave him a shockingly rude Nadiv label, meaning damaged, retarded, slow. He looked at her, fully present for a moment. Sincerely, he started to say, "I'm sorry, I won't..." Her look was hostile, ugly. Everything okay?" Tor was behind him, shepherding him back to the table. He raised an eyebrow at Nazar. "I see you, you mad bitch." Saam was summoned to the consul's office when she reported that he had used her computer without asking permission. Unauthorized, as she put it, to contact outsiders. "You left it unguarded and the door open," said Keris mildly. She had nothing to say to that. Saam offered, "I'm sorry, I just wanted to talk to my team, tell them I'm okay. That isn't forbidden, is it? I'm not a prisoner." "No, you are not a prisoner." Keris smiled at him. To Nazar, "I'm sorry I ate your lunch." "Well, no, I'm not. It was really good." Anyone else would have been charmed by that smile. Keris certainly was. She complained that he had taken a knife from the kitchen. I told them to count the knives afterwards. Keris blinked and asked Saam, "Did you take a knife?" He considered lying, and it showed in his face. Then he said, "Only one. You have so many. I'm used to carrying one. I feel vulnerable without one." He was looking straight at him. Keris was enjoying his frank gaze. "Can you see why we might be concerned?" Saam smiled and declaimed, "I am no threat to any man who wishes me no harm," moving his hands balletically in the traditional gestures that accompanied the line. Keris was taken aback. "I haven't heard Havarian in 20 years. How much of the saga do you know?" Saam shrugged and said, "All of it." Then a little doubt. "Well." Keris's normal reserve melted a little. Warmly he said, "We shall give your head a few more days to recover. Then we shall try you. For now, enough walking. You swim?" Saam replied, "Yes, He shivered. "Yes, I can swim." He had been brutally beaten on the Vengeance for referring to his owner, talking like a slave. He thought for a moment. To hell with them. He looked Keris in the eye. "Yes, I can swim. My owner taught me." Saam began to understand the significance of his new earring when, coming back naked from a twice-daily swim, he encountered the elder consul. He was taking a peach from the carrot managing the food table. She had waved him across, knowing his fondness for them. Still leaning forward, holding it to his face, revelling in the smell, when a large hand landed on his bare behind and squeezed. Saam, who had not lived this long by reacting rashly, waited to see what came next. An older man's voice said in his ear, "Now there's a peach for you." A contented groan of appreciation. "Ah, there was a day when I would have made you sweat, boy." And he laughed. Saam turned to see a much older Hannath male, white-haired, though the large grey eyes seemed too young for what must have once been a stunningly handsome face. Saam looked him in the eye, curious. "Damn it, these young men are bold." He wagged a hand in mock reproach. "There was a time I would have taught you some manners. Or perhaps not. I might have enjoyed a little of your impudence." He looked up and down the lean body. "Need to put on a bit of meat. Shouldn't be too hard. Never met a Carib who didn't like to eat." Saam became aware of the slaves around him, standing still, anxious. Not for him, he realized. They were waiting to see how he would react to the old man. Talon was standing behind the old Hannath, shaking her head. "Don't hurt him." Is that what she was saying? "You're new, aren't you?" Effortlessly, Saam took on the role that was needed. "Yes, sir." He came closer. "Thought I hadn't seen you. Are you well trained? You know how to use that pretty mouth?" He touched Saam's face quite gently, stroked his cheek. The silence around them was palpable. Talon's face was horrified and frightened. Saam could find no better answer than, "Yes, sir." Well, it was the truth.
"If I could die inside you, I could die happy."
And he put a hand on Saam's chest, stroking one pectoral. He seemed to forget where he was for a moment. Then Saam, turning his head so slightly to make questioning eye contact with Talon, moved in such a way that the earring was visible to the old man. He saw it and stopped in his tracks, dropped his hand, backed off.
Didn't realize. Talon, where's Talon?
Distressed. The little Carrot tugged at his gown. "Right here, sir."
"I didn't mean anything by it, you know. No need to make a fuss,"
he said to the world in general. "No, sir, of course not," said Saam.
"I need to get some sleep,"
he said crossly to Talon, and the little Carrot led him away. She looked over her shoulder at Saam, gratefully, relieved.
"Made an ass of myself."
No, sir." She was comforting him as they walked away. People were moving again. Some of them, a little shy of him before, now smiled at Saam. Tor was next to him. Saam asked, "When did he get hurt?" He had seen the massive scar that ran across the man's head above his ear.
"When they crashed here. He's not so very much older than Keris. He was consul back then."
Saam nodded, hoping that, if ever he were so badly damaged, they would just let him die. "Tor," he asked, "what's this?" He touched his ear.
"It's the best protection the consul could give you."
He rested a brotherly hand on Saam's shoulder.
"I wouldn't take it too seriously."
It didn't take Saam long to realize that he would have to start wearing more clothes. On Hannath he was raised to be uninhibited about being naked, and expected that here in Little Hannath it would be unremarkable. But it seemed that those around him didn't feel the same. Nazar wouldn't look at him or speak to him, wouldn't acknowledge his existence when he was naked. The Caribs giggled, and the Hannath who lived in the compound paid him entirely too much attention. While the elder consul was the only one to lay a hand on him, many of them stared and smiled to themselves. He was sitting after a swim, toweling himself, when Keris approached him.
"I've done as you asked. Talon will put some more clothes in your room."
He waved away Saam's attempt to rise, which was still painful for him, as well as his thanks. Saam's fear of Keris was almost gone, but it was something to be addressed casually this way. He was a reserved and powerful man. The rest of the compound moved round him respectfully, made space for him. To touch him was unthinkable. Keris caressed Saam's hair delicately, stroked the curls from his forehead, and watched them fall back into place.
"Such a shame. But of course you couldn't have worn that fine braid here, could you?"
Then, feeling the scars under the hairline, he saw Saam wince.
"That still gives you pain."
Saam shrugged. Keris moved around and behind him so that Saam was never quite able to look at him, examining, touching him softly.
"Is that a bullet wound? How barbaric. Is that as painful as it sounds? Like being fucked by a fant?"
Keris exploded with laughter, a noise rarely heard, making some of the slaves stop and look. They enjoyed watching him laugh. Keris put a hand behind Saam's head, pushed him gently just so, and his head dropped back naturally into the palm of his hand.
"Your face is almost back to normal."
He stroked his skin with apparent innocent interest. "We brought in specialists to fix you. Tor kept you sedated for a good 10 days, to spare you the pain of that." One hand dropped to the still angry scar on his chest.
That needs more work. They can do better than that. He lay the hand flat on Saam's chest, much as the old man had done, except he was gazing into Saam's eyes as he did it. Saam lay with his head in Keris's hand, looked into those glossy, almost black eyes. And then Keris slowly spread his fingers, and ever so gently brushed his nipple. Saam was taken by surprise. He shivered, gave a small gasp, and closed his eyes for a moment. Keris wore a satisfied smile, a look that said, "That's what I thought." Then the Hannath was sitting beside him, hip to hip, but facing the other way, close but not looking at each other. Two old friends sitting and chatting on a park bench. He leaned his head closer to Saam's, still not looking him in the face, asked quietly, confidentially, "You prefer women. That's your preference." Saam, still flushed, nodded dumbly. Keris nodded with him. "Have you ever been with a man who was gentle with you?" Saam thought. Took his time. "No." He was trembling slightly. Keris patted his bare thigh in a friendly manner as he rose. "We'll talk later." Leaving Saam aware of every inch of his skin, bursting to fuck something. He wrapped the towel round him and headed for the shower. A long, cold shower.